At the foot of the Jura Hills in Canton Vaud, in the heart of a religious community where time seems to have stood still, an amazing modern building has appeared. It's a wooden chapel with a revolutionary design inspired by the Japanese art of origami. This audacious building in a region steeped in tradition has a very simple history.
Mais dans lesquels nous croyons en ta grâce, dans ce jour en particulier.
The temporary chapel has a surprising shape that really grabs you. It was the product of a long period of reflection. We had to carry out major repairs to the main building that housed the chapel. We wondered whether, during this transitional period of almost 2 years, we would end up with a tent or a porta cabin. But our situation at the foot of the Jura Hills wasn't ideal for a tent, and I didn't think a porta cabin was a great idea. Basically, we were lucky enough to get in touch with architects who carried out a series of projects using wood.
As the old building was being renovated, the Deaconesses' Chapel was temporarily out of bounds. Architects Danilo Mondada and Antoine Robert Grandpierre decided to submit plans for an efficient, economical and quick replacement. They worked with Hans Bury from the Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne, the EPFL. Amazingly, the temporary chapel was built within 3 months.
In the end, we found a solution after deciding to work with a prefabricated wooden structure. This also serves as the building frame, facade and exterior.
For several years, the Ibois laboratory at the EPFL has been developing prototype models of light, modern buildings inspired by origami. After Antoine Robert Grandpierre met Hans Bury at the Saint-Loup Chapel, they were able to move from theory to practice.
When the first trucks started arriving, loaded with wooden parts, and they were slowly assembled, people asked lots of questions about what this place of worship would look like. So to see all these different parts assembled, and then for them suddenly to become a chapel, was a great surprise.
Gosh, you've made lots of progress.
Yes.
She's racing ahead.
I'm not so sure.
Yes, you too. You're doing really well.
It's going quickly here. I don't know how to do the others quickly, so I'm going slowly.
Good job, you have the time.
As we watched the entire construction phase, we became fascinated by the whole thing. We saw the foundations being laid, and we pretty much counted each of the 5,000 screws that were used. Personally, I've never liked the outside, but when you're in there, you feel so at home. It's true that we've grown fond of it.
In any case, we're very grateful to have a chapel while we're waiting for the renovations to be finished.
We couldn't have done without it.
In a community, you can't do without a place of worship. That's not possible.
Absolutely.
It was daring. It's probably what's known as the daring side of faith. But we had the self-belief. And our architects were also very confident. We nuns were very quickly won over by what was slowly taking shape before our eyes.
Origami is from Japan. Ori means fold and gami means paper, so it's the folding of paper. In theory, it's about taking a sheet of paper, often square, and then simply transforming it by folding it, turning it into a figure or structure just by folding. It's basically a very simple principle. But what's interesting is that with this simple approach, you can create a large number of different shapes and variations. When designing the chapel, we could see that folds had a lot of advantages. For example, we organized the folds in such a way that there were good acoustics in the chapel. No fold has the same angle, so the sound bounces in a special way. You get a similar phenomenon with light. Light enters through the two large lateral facades and is reflected on the various wooden panels, which diffuse a soft light throughout the inside of the chapel. We're maybe somewhere in the middle now. I find that quite special. It's neither totally inside nor totally outside. That's the principle of a fold. A fold is never completely on the inside and never completely on the outside. It always depends on which side you're on.
What was important for us was, firstly, that it should be a welcoming, convivial, warm place. We can enjoy the serenity radiating from the wood when we're outside the building, as well as inside during choir sessions. This use of pleasant, calm lighting is really important for a place where people are received.
Important pour un lieu de recueillement.
Obviously, with respect to religious architecture, cathedrals were designed to last for 1,000 years. But here we're confronted with a different temporary situation. Basically, it's only built to last a few years. So the project's really about sustainability, which is trendy at the moment. We don't just want to build for 1,000 years, we think we build things for durability, with respect for the environment and future generations. This means that a temporary building can't just disappear, but must also be used again in the best possible way. So in that sense, the temporary chapel is a building that is part of a sustainable vision.
At the beginning, the temporary aspect meant that it could have a second life. It makes us question the temporal quality of this chapel. I think it could last a lot longer than the 2 years planned. It could perhaps last 10 years or more. It's often like that with temporary buildings. You have a magnificent building like the Vidi Theatre by Max Bill, designed for an exhibition, which is still there. It's one of the best theatres in French-speaking Switzerland, if not the entire country. In that sense, I think the notion of temporary is relative. The future will show how temporary it really is.
Les futurs possibles de cette chapelle.
There are various possible future scenarios for this chapel. Some are rather negative and would make the community unhappy. For instance, if the chapel, once a place for meeting and prayer, were to become simply a storage area with no prospects.
Simplement stocker les éléments alignés n'ayant plus d'avenir.
Another scenario, unlikely to please the community, would be if the chapel were to be handed back and then used as a discotheque or nightclub. This wouldn't really be what Saint-Loup had in mind. We'd be equally sad about that. This chapel looks like a chrysalis on Saint-Loup's plain. We still dream that it may remain a chapel and offer people of all ages a kind of spiritual rebirth. But it's just a dream. We really don't know what will happen.